There's one other feature of the input widgets that I'd like to mention before we go on to other things. And this still falls under the overall category of providing resources. And that is the ability to change the input keyboard. Now, in our current layout, which here I have the layout from the landscape approach, we have an edit text. Incidentally, what I did is I changed that layout height on the linear layout that held the two buttons and made it wrap content so it didn't span the entire size of the remaining space inside the screen. At any rate, if I look at my edit text, it says that my edit text doesn't have any special keyboard or input type. It's the actual term we're looking for. If I take a look in the documentation, I don't think I can search for input type and have it come up with anything. Well, there's a constant for it. I'll go to there. But what I'm really going to look at is I'm going to look at the editables. So here they try to give us a whole bunch of variations. And this is interesting. Nice to know all these things exist, but not the helpful part I want. What I want is to do text input. And here's a guide to text fields. So they demonstrate that if you were going to send an email, for example, it makes a lot more sense to have an @ sign on the keyboard and a prominent dot and everything for email addresses. So you can specify the keyboard type by using the input type attribute in an edit text. So if this is the default text type, this is the text email type. Notice the @ sign sitting right here. In addition, you could specify a phone type, for example, or a text URI, which will put in the normal text keyboard and a slash, numeric keyboards, phone-style keyboards, all this stuff, capitalized words, autocorrect underneath it, passwords so that everything gets masked, even multi-line, on and on. And you can use a vertical bar to essentially AND these together, so that in this case a postal address is going to be a text postal address with capitalized individual words and no suggestions being popped up as well. This is so easy to do in practice that if you don't do it, it actually makes your app look a little bit amateurish. It's a very simple thing to demonstrate. So let me go back to my code here, and inside my edit text, what I'll do is I'm going to say input type equals, and there's my drop-down list of all the different possibilities. Date, date time, number, number decimal, etc. I think just to prove a point, I'll put in email address so that I'll see the ampersand show up on there. And I think that's sufficiently different from some of the others to be clear as to what that I'm doing something different. But you'll see that there are lots and lots of possibilities here. So I just said text email address. So when I deploy again, now I'm going to have a problem, actually. And the problem is that my current emulator doesn't take keyboard input. My current emulator uses the keyboard. I should say it doesn't have a soft keyboard. It uses the keyboard from my host environment, from the laptop. I could make a separate emulator that did have a soft keyboard, and I have done that. But this actually gives me an opportunity to bring up one thing I haven't shown yet, which is how to run on a connected device rather than running on an emulator. Now, I have a connected device. I have a Galaxy Note 4, in fact, right here. But unfortunately, it would be difficult to present that to you directly. So instead, I'm going to use another utility. Now, this utility is a free one known as Droid@Screen. It's simply a way to project an Android device onto your screen, which is useful for presentations. When I'm actually just developing Android apps, there's no need for this. It's only useful when I need to do what I'm doing now, which is to project it on a video or in a room, a conference room. So this is how to show your Android device on a computer. I downloaded Droid@Screen, which is a simple jar file. So here, if I go look at it, here's my jar file called Droid@Screen. I have now connected my device via a USB cable. Now, Droid at Screen will notice both the emulator and my connected device. I don't need to see a snapshot of the emulator. This is my connected device at the moment. Let me rescale it, make it a little bit smaller there, a little bit easier to see. I think I can close this now as well. And the hardest part here is to resist clicking on something on the screen because that's only a snapshot. I actually have to adjust it on the actual physical device to see and wait for this thing to update. So with this in mind, let me go back and deploy my app. Now, while I'm doing that, I should mention that in order to plug in a connected device, you have to enable the developer options. Now you see, here's my second device, my Samsung, coming up as my additional running device. When I say you have to enable the developer options, that means that you have to go into the settings and go find the About Phone setting inside there, and then go find the build number. And then, believe it or not, you have to tap on the build number 7 times. It'll actually count down with you. Tap 6 more times, tap 5 more times, etc. to enable developer options. And then that will turn on the developer options. Then you can get out of there, and as a developer option, you can allow the third-party installs. You could allow it to connect. You could allow it to be debuggable from the actual environment, all those things. Now, what I have done is I've deployed my app on the device, and here you can see it. There is the deployment itself, and if I click manually on the text field, you should see the keyboard. Now, let me wait until it updates on the screen here. That looks like the same old keyboard from before. It looks like I didn't do anything. Well, yeah, but that's because I only edited the landscape view. So if I rotate the device, and now I'm going to rotate it on the screen here. Let me click the little rotate button. This way and then this way. There we go. I know if I play with it enough. And now click again inside here. I'm just waiting for the snapshot to catch up. Now you see the @ sign and the .com. In other words, I have a keyboard now that really is a text email address type of keyboard. And that's how easy it is to change the input type. And I changed it right here to text email address, and it accommodated that in the landscape activity main XML file. So that whenever I'm in landscape mode, I have a text input address, text email address input type. Now, of course, I wouldn't want it that way. What I should have done, and what I would do in practice, is I would make that a default in the actual landscape or layout folder. Because what happens is that the layout folder with no dashes on it becomes the default, and anything I override in layout land would take into effect on land, but it would still use what remaining settings were left in layout. I just happened to modify the layout land activity main XML file, so I went with it. It is a good idea when you have multiple layouts to make sure one of them has nothing added to it so that it becomes the default layout in that process. At any rate, this is how you can work with connected devices. One final thing I should say about that, because I'm on a Mac, all I had to do was plug in the device and enable the settings on the device for it to work. If you're on Windows, then you have to install a USB driver to make that happen. On Linux, some of them require driver installs and some don't. It depends on which they are. They have a nice little web page at the developer site to try to tell you which is which, and you can go on from there. So that was deploying onto a real device and changing the input type. And I think that's enough about providing alternative resources. Now we'll go on and add additional activities and start talking about intents.